welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Darker topic, let's do it. People who have killed someone, accidentally or otherwise. What happened? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. 1995. Was living with my druggy mother and sister who was 4 years older than me. My mom worked at a bar, and as a 7-year-old kid, lived half my time in that bar. We did have a house, that more of a shed on the lot that was converted into a house. Well, my mom got close with one of the patrons, who also drank a lot and did drugs. Well, one day she broke up with him, I guess, and he kept coming over threatening her. A few days later, she gets a call from him, not sure what was said, but she tries to hurry us into the back room where we kept our clothes. She attempts to hide us under all the clothes, but I start freaking out and try to leave the house. As I get to the front door, a truck pulls in. I stop and hear him get out, screaming for my mother. He tries to get in the door at first and fails. I'm about 3 feet to the side of the front door. He shoots at the door. I freak and jump on top of the couch that is right next to the door while also grabbing my t-ball bat. He kicks and kicks at the door, and it finally opens. He walks in, and I pout him right in the forehead. He instantly goes out. I scream, and my mom finally comes out with my sister, and we both leave, then call the police at the bar. That same night, I went to go live with my father permanently, as my mother had arrest warrants. I didn't know until I was about 16 that he had ended up dying in the hospital between my concussion and alcohol poisoning. I don't feel bad about it, though. In '76, I was 6 years old. My grandpa was my best friend and my hero. He always wore striped bib overalls, so I had to have matching ones. I'd sit on his lap, and we'd eat Cheetos and watch Zorro. We'd also play a silly game, pulling hair out of each other's arm. We were wrestling around one day, and I hit him in the nose with my head, and it started to bleed, so badly that he ended up in the hospital. He died 2 days later. I was always told that I remembered it wrong, and I had nothing to do with it. Last year I was at my uncle's, another man who I greatly admired. I knew he would tell me the truth, so I asked him. He pretty much said I remembered it correctly. Grandpa was taking blood thinners, and the hospital never really got the bleeding stopped, and he basically choked to death. Before anyone says my uncle was an asshole for telling me this, I'm grateful to finally know the truth. Watched my friend fall almost 1,000 feet to his death while rock climbing. No idea why he switched ropes when he was watching me secure them. He even asked me to yell when secure. Took almost 45 minutes to get down to his body. Haven't climbed since. Everyone tells me that I need to get over it, to move on. It's not my fault. Lots of people tell me lots of things about this. I am kind of drunk, and that helps me tell the story. To this day, I firmly believe that my inaction killed a 2-year-old little girl. 8 years ago, I was working at a local chapter of a national disaster response agency. Before said agency went through all of its changes, decision-making was kept at the local level. This led the local chapter I was working at to F up a lot. Before I started as an AmeriCorps member, the previous executive director had been fired for inaction. The AmeriCorps member before me was working a second job for the local emergency management agency, had stolen federal grant money, and ended up in federal prison for a while. Anyway, they hired a new executive director, new program director, and after a little bit, they got an AmeriCorps member, me. Being the only young person on the team, I started slowly updating the computer system and integrating us into the National Disaster Database. One of my functions was to take all of the old disaster files, mainly house fires, and enter them into the database. We were required to enter all of the client data, case notes, and action plan for each fire. Even though we're a small chapter, I had about 80 cases to enter. I started entering the 3rd week of August, and at the same time I was working on entering the backlog of cases my chapter responded to 7 house fires in 5 weeks. What most people don't tell you is that most fires happen in the middle of the night. Most, but not all. One Saturday morning about 10 a.m., I was called out to respond to a house fire in a small town out in the county. When I got there, the fire department was still on scene. I do the whole routine. get information, take them to a hotel, issue client assistance cards, and move forward. I come back and enter in the information, and I get this sense of deja vu. However, seeing that it's a beautiful Saturday and I'd been working on the case for 4 hours, I blew the feeling off. That Sunday, I went off call for 3 weeks. I knew that we had a fire during those 3 weeks, but because of working on the backlog, I didn't immediately enter the new file. So now it's the first week of October. I'm entering the newest case file and it hits me. The main adult names are different, but the kids' names are the same. The date of birth and the last four of the social match, and that's when I start to piece it together. In 2 years, this extended family has had 5 fires in 4 different jurisdictions. Being rural, we have one professional fire service in our biggest town, and everyone else around us being volunteers. This often leads to my dick is bigger syndrome, and information sharing doesn't happen. So, I take the information to my boss. I line out the following case. Without going too much into the details, Mom and Dad are not together in that picture. Fire 1, at Mom's house 2 years ago. Jurisdiction 1, Fire 2, at Dad's apartment 18 months ago. Jurisdiction 2, Fire 3, fire at Grandma and Grandpa's 6 months ago. Jurisdiction 3, Fire 4, fire at Grandma and Grandpa's dad and girlfriend's apartment 3 weeks ago. Jurisdiction 3, Fire 5, fire at Grandma and Grandpa's mom's brothers, etc. 2 weeks ago. Jurisdiction 4. I say the main thing in common with all of these fires is that the kids are home at the time of the fire and they'd been left unattended. This has to be a juvenile fire setter. In my mind, that was the only explanation, and I told my boss we had to call the office of the state fire marshal and report this. After taking all of this in, she looked at me and said, "That's not our job." At this point, I knew I had to do something. I knew that I was the only person that had put it together. I had the moral imperative to blow the whistle and stand my ground. I had the duty to go out of ranks and report what I had found out. And I was too scared to pick up the phone. I was too scared of getting in trouble to do the decent and right thing. The first week of November, at 8 o'clock in the morning, the disaster phone rang. It was county dispatch, alerting me to a fire on the east side of town. When I pulled up, I knew something was wrong. All the firefighters were kind of milling around looking lost. The fire chief was on site. The ambulance was just pulling away. She burned to death, not smoke inhalation. The fire started in the mattress she was sleeping on, and she burned to death. Actually, no, that's not 100% true. She arrived at the hospital and was alive for 2 hours with 3rd and 4th degree burns on 90% of her body. I didn't do my job. I didn't stand up and do the right thing. Little girl died. I know I'm late to this, so there's no chance it gets seen. Surprise. But I need to get this out there. I'm 22 now. This happened when I was 19, and I still think about it almost every day. From the time I was really young, 4 or 5 probably, my dad had kidney problems. He was on dialysis for a while, got a transplant that lasted for a good few years, and then back to dialysis. The last stint on dialysis lasted 10 years. He finally decided he was in too much agony to continue treatment. He came home with the plans to live his last few days in the comfort of his home, surrounded with loved ones. Fast forward 2 weeks, which is a long time to survive without dialysis, for those who aren't aware. Dad's health was going downhill fast. All the symptoms of the end stages of uremic poisoning. We knew the inevitable was going to happen, and probably very soon. He was gasping for air with every breath. To this day, it's the hardest thing I've ever witnessed. Hospice had provided comfort drugs for the end stages, namely concentrated liquid morphine. I couldn't stand to see the strongest man I've ever known struggle anymore, so I loaded 2 syringes with morphine and put them under his tongue. I knew it was the poison in his body. I know it was the sickness. I know he was suffering, and I made the right decision. But I also have to live with the fact that I know the dose of morphine I administered was what ended it all for him. It's not easy knowing that you technically ended your father's life. I was seeing a guy for over a year. One of those amazing people, hilarious, works with kids, takes care of family. I loved him. He was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. He had about 2 years to live. Lots of headaches, seizures. He was really ashamed and fearful of being a burden. There was a surgery offered to him. It had a decent chance to give him an extra 5 to 7 years. He wasn't interested, and that broke my heart. We talked. I convinced him. He agreed to have it and went in about a month later. He had a massive stroke during the surgery and died. He had a DNR that I didn't know about. They had to let him go. His mom vomited when she found out. I'll never be able to face his family. It's taken me years to talk about it, but I think about him every day. I'll never forgive myself for being that selfish. I know it's easier said than done, but it's not really your fault. You recommended something that looked to extend his life, and it didn't work out. I was driving on a small, treacherous mountain road and my brakes went out. My friend talked me through it, and I was able to stop my truck by easing into the mountainside at 55 miles per hour. The truck flipped and rolled and landed on the edge of a cliff. My friend's head was crushed during the roll. He tried to breathe, but his neck was broken. He died as I was talking to him. One night I was having a party in my house, which was still half being built. Myself and a couple of my friends were having a few drinks and a couple of joints and just relaxing and having a good time. The top floor of my house had not been built yet. Actually, we had just built up a staircase at the top, and there was only a very small platform extending out from the staircase. My best friend had been helping me with all of the building and knew my house as well as I did. He later told me that we went up the stairs to take a leak over the edge because he wanted to look at the moon and the stars. He fell. There really was nothing to stand on out there, so he stepped into darkness. My best friend survived, but he broke his back and became a paraplegic. I cried for days, but when I saw him in the hospital, I put on my bravest face and made lists of things that we could still do together again. He had a wife and 2 children, and for a time he stayed around and was released from hospital. I carried him on my back everywhere for months, and I felt so guilty for what had happened. One night he got sick and went back to hospital to get some tests done. I learned many years later that he got all of his other friends to conspire against me. They brought him enough drugs to the hospital for him to kill himself, and no one told me because they knew that I'd try to stop him. He committed suicide by overdose in the hospital and died peacefully, leaving behind his wife and 2 children. No note. I guess he thought we'd all understand. I have a photo of him in his hospital bed just 2 days before his suicide. This big, beautiful, lying smile on his face, trying to look happy. But now I know that inside he was already dead. I still haven't fully forgiven myself. I could have boarded up the doorway that led to the top floor of my house. Now that the top floor room and balcony are finished, I still get a small chill when I walk through that doorway. I'll always miss my best friend, and I'm thankful that his son and I have such a good relationship, and he doesn't blame me for what happened. Please scan your surroundings and take care of your friends, especially when you've been drinking. Similar to the others here, I was the driver in a car crash, slid on some black ice on the freeway, spun a few times before getting T-boned by an SUV going full speed. Friend in the passenger seat busted up his head in the windshield. My brother behind me fractured his skull, and my best friend in the passenger side back seat died. My friends at the time used humor to get through things. I have a dark sense of humor, but they consistently went too far, and I ended up leaving all my close friends. For years after I had to go to court because of other cars that were affected by the crash, and my friend's mom was trying to sue me for more money than $100K my insurance already paid out. I used to scream out in my sleep. I dropped out of college shortly after an attempted suicide. Much better now, but 5 years later, and I still get anxiety when it snows. 14 years old, spent the night at my best friend's house after our hometown 4th of July celebration. Woke up in the morning to find that her mother had left us to babysit her 8-month-old sister while she, the mom, ran errands. We're painting our nails on the floor of the kitchen while the infant cruises around in her walker and hear a crash. We forgot to put the gate up, and the baby fell down the stairs in her walker. 7 effing stairs. She hit her head on the railing and died in the hospital after 3 days in the ICU. About 4 years of PTSD for me, but no one really knew I was there. My best friend was branded a baby killer. High school's tough.